Good evening. I want to thank you all for being here at the meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission, January 5th, 2021. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll process this evening call items on the agenda, which we would then have staff report and open a public hearing. And those in favor, if you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record, and then we'll close the public hearing and then hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. The first item on the agenda is a consent docket item A, CHC Management LLC Final Plat, SUB 20-22, requesting review and approval of the final plat for Skyline East. Second section, Phase 1, creating 69 residential lots with one outlot at property currently addressed as 1798 North Payne Street in the residential single-family small lot RSS district. Since it's on the consent docket, normally that would mean that we would have a motion to determine whether to just accept the consent docket as such or take it out of the consent docket. So
I move that we take it out of the consent docket.
do we have a second?
I will second that.
It has been moved and seconded that we will remove this from the consent docket and put it into the general agenda. We will now vote.
Mr. Rickelman?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Allred?
Yes.
The motion to remove from the consent docket passes 3 yes to no no's. So we will then begin staff. Thank you, sir.
Chairman, members of the Commission, this is the proposed first phase of Skyline East Section 2. You will recall that the area in the hatch pattern is the subject property in question. You can see Sunrise, Skyline, Kraler, and Jardot, as well as adjacent residential and acreage areas surrounding it. This is the aerial, so this would be looking from south to north. You can see the junior high and parkland on the west side of the aerial. You can see Jardot on the east. This is the layout of the proposed plat as they presented it to staff. You may recall the preliminary plat had conditions that there be 3 different conditions, one of them being a connection to Jardot, one being that more be a pedestrian access, which is right here. According to code, subdivisions of over 30 lots have to have at least 2 connections, street connections. They have a connection off Kraler and a connection off Payne at the present time. You can see here the layout of the lot and blocks. The third condition would be the access to Jardot. That would be up in this area where Brook is. They've left that out and verbally have stated that that will be in the second final plat of this addition. With that, staff would be happy to stand for questions.
I have no questions, but I want to commend the staff on the research they did looking into the comp plan and transportation and how it pertains to this particular plat.
Thank you.
All right. I will then open the public hearing. Normally we have the applicant or their representative speak first. So, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Stephen Gose with Gose & Associates, 113 East 8th Avenue. Here on behalf of the applicant, seeking approval of the final plat. It's in general conformance with the preliminary plat and the conditions put on it. As Mr. Harkins stated, the road to Jardot will be part of the second phase of the plat when it comes through. That area is currently being used for construction to keep concrete trucks and everything else off the existing streets and out of the neighborhood. So if there's any questions now or later, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes. What's a tentative time frame for phase two?
They're going to roll right into phase 2 once phase 1 is complete. So they're trying to get phase 1 complete for early mid-February. And once the concrete work is done, the dirt and utilities can come back in. Well, the dirt work's pretty much done on phase 2. They've started clearing the off-site sanitary sewer easements to start those utilities. So again, once concrete's done, the utility crews will come back in, get water sewer in the ground for phase 2, pave it, and then we'll come in with the final plat for that.
So relatively soon after the completion of phase one?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
They're not anticipating any stop
Lag.
work time, so,
Okay, all right, thank you.
yep. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this item, please step forward and give your name and address for the record. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the item, please step forward and give your name and address for the record. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for staff's alternatives.
So as noted in the staff report, we've issued the following findings of fact. The proposed layout of this final plat does potentially meet planning and zoning requirements in the Land Development Code. As we noted in the earlier presentation, subdivisions over 30 lots have to have 2 street connections. This has that. The comp plan does recommend low-density residential. Right now, there's a mix of residential and ag with some industrial and commercial to the east along Jardot. The density is in alignment with the RSS zoning district, which is what this area is zoned currently. And we did, as we mentioned, 2 of the 3 conditions that were imposed by the preliminary plat, not once but twice, have been met. They've given you a timeline for when they think the second phase that would include that 3rd condition would be met. We do feel that it might be prudent with the history of this plat to wait until we have that connection before taking it to city council. But if you feel it is applicable to move forward, that is your prerogative at this time. Staff would only ask that we give us the ability, or you hold their feet to the, as we say, to the fire on the timeline of when they are bringing that second phase in, so that we don't have a long delay. With that said, here's your alternatives. 1, you can accept the findings and you can recommend approval as presented. We would note that under the Land Development Code that because there's only 3 of the 5 members of the commission, all 3 members would need to vote affirmative to approve the plat. You can accept the findings and recommend approval with conditions. You can find that this request is not appropriate and recommend denial, or you can table this item to a date certain if you feel additional information or discussion is needed at this time. Questions about the findings or alternatives? Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, discussion and/or motions and/or,
Well, I'd be favorable to option 2, accepting the findings and approve the proposal final plat with conditions. The condition being that it would be contingent upon either a written agreement from the applicant that there will be an extension to Jardot, or that they will modify the final plat showing that there will be a connection to Jardot.
If we have conditions, we're normally required to have some sort of a reason or that for which we are adding this thing. So can you?
Well, right
if
now, we
that's-
only have a verbal agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So as part of the review process for the final plat and staff comments and responses, the preliminary plat was revised to meet the conditions from this body previously, and it was submitted with that document, comment response, all of that. So hopefully you guys have that in your packet, but the preliminary plat has been revised to reflect your conditional approval from the previous meeting. So that extension to Jardeau is shown on that preliminary plat that was part of the final plat review process with staff. So it's documented, it's in there that it is part of the overall project.
Okay, I find that explanation acceptable.
All right, thank you.
Since that was the condition that you felt at least concerned about, I think that stabilizes that. Do you feel like that's enough for you to motion for acceptance as presented, or, you know?
So, to touch on what Mr. Harkins was saying, I'm not quite sure, perhaps we can get legal guidance on this. I would like to somehow add conditions to hold the feet to the fire. I'm not sure how to word that, phrase that.
I would ask Mr. Harkins to maybe provide a little bit additional explanation on that, and then let's see if we can fashion something that's
Sure.
acceptable.
So right now, we've had verbal confirmation and we've had written confirmation in the preliminary plat. What we haven't seen when we brought up in our internal review with the developer and their agent is we recommended adding additional lots to get to where the intersection of Jardeau would be, as an example, to indicate on this phase. That way Planning Commission and Council could see early on that all three conditions would be met. Even if the full intersection wasn't built, we could show on the first phase that the connection to Jardeau would be there. That way in staff's opinion, we'd be heading off a lot of potential opposition and discussion. We could show everything clearly. If the developer or their agent's willing to somehow in writing, as this goes to council, help further solidify that commitment, not just in the preliminary plat, but even in a letter of, this is our proposed timeline for the second phase that will include Jardeau, that probably would be beneficial and I think useful for council's decision making. I don't know if that's something the applicant or their agent would be willing to do.
I guess initially my concern with stating a timeline is tomorrow the economy goes to crap for a decade. We can't have somebody go build a road if there's no money to build it. As far as it being in writing, we got comments December 8th as part of the final plat review. One of them is include the access to Jardeau in the first phase of the final plat process. Mr. Harkins and I talked about this. We put in writing back to the city, the access road to Jardeau will be included in phase 2 of the final plat. So that's in writing, public record, part of this. Comment 2, note the area that will be in the second phase. The preliminary plat will be included with this submittal of the final plat to verify phase lines. So with that was a revised copy of the preliminary plat with phase lines, phase 2, phase 1. So as far as it being in writing, I'd hate to put a condition that it's got to be built by, November 2nd of 2020, no questions asked. If you condition that there's no certificate of occupancy issued for a building in phase 2 until that road's been accepted by city council, that's a potential option. But, it doesn't seem justifiable to put a hard and fast date on phase 2 because there's so many things out of everybody's control that we have met the conditional requirements was a road to Jardo as part of the project. It is being put in with phase 2 so that construction access is from Jardo during construction, so we're not running those concrete trucks and dirt trucks for phase 1 through the neighborhood. We can do it over there. So I don't know what else we could put in writing, but there is in the file for this project, for this application, responses of when that road will be built. So in text and in drawings.
And, thank you. And I think that we've had multi-stage projects in the past where parts are done as it goes along, and we've not placed these kinds of additional requirements on those developers to sort of, Boy Scout honor code that they're going to do X, Y, or Z if it's preliminarily platted that way. So, although given the circumstances of this development, I know it's been difficult in terms of what we've done, but we normally, as long as it follows the platting and the preliminary platting, we've been amenable in the past on that.
Certainly, and I agree to that. I agree to what Mr. Gose said. I don't think anybody can put any, this must be built by tomorrow kind of thing. I simply wanted to explore a little bit further Mr. Harkins' recommendation on expand a little bit further on what possibly that could look like, what that could be, which is why I was asking legal counsel and Mr. Harkins, but that was all that purpose was.
Well, I viewed the plat on a small scale, so obviously I couldn't tell that the extension had been included in the final plat. But if it has, then as part of the drawing, then that is a written agreement. May not be text, but it is written agreement embedded in the drawing.
Well, I think it's actually included in the phase 2 of the final plat, not in phase 1, correct? But it is in the preliminary plat. And one thing that I will say, and I'll give him an opportunity to disagree with me on this, but I do think that from the city's perspective, there are a number of things that you all, a number of tools that you all have, like, for example, not issuing any building permits or certificates of occupancy. And because the density is such that you're only talking about building half of it, from a legal perspective, I think you've got some protections. But staff may have a different perspective on that.
If Mr. Gose is confident in this timeline, and based on the other discussion and written communication up to this point, we can move forward. We can make this work. And if we see issues later on, we do have those tools that Attorney Childs has mentioned that's at our disposal. So we can definitely make this work going forward.
Mr. Chairman, without any further discussion or without any objection, I would move to approve.
I'll second that.
It is moved and seconded that we accept Sam 5A and recommend for approval. We will now vote.
Mr. Reckelman?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht?
Yes.
The motion passes 3 yes to no no's. The next item on the agenda is, for public hearing, is Marie and Thomas Everett, Specific use permit, SUP 20-08, requesting review and approval of a specific use permit to allow medical marijuana grow facility at property addressed as 4818 North Washington Street in the Agriculture A zoning district. This has been deferred from our previous December 1st, 2020 meeting. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, this was deferred from the December 1st meeting based on the idea that the deferral originally would give the applicant and their agent time to have discussions with adjacent property owners regarding this item, to see if things could be adjusted or compromises could be made. In that time, in the last 24 hours, we have received a written request from the applicant's attorney requesting a deferral to February 2nd, 2021, to that Planning Commission meeting in order to have those discussions. They've indicated in their request they've not had that opportunity to have that yet. Staff would be supportive of that deferral based on the applicant's desire to continue those discussions, for one, and two, as part of the process, we still do not have a copy of their application to the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, nor a copy of any type of license, provisional or otherwise. And that typically is a process that we include in the application packets, even with the changes that OMMA has done over the last year. Since we don't have that information, we would be supportive of a deferral for both of those reasons.
Commissioners?
What was the date deferral?
The meeting in February 2nd.
February
Yes,
2nd.
February 2nd.
First meeting in February, I assume that's the date.
That's
Okay.
correct. It would be the first meeting in February.
I mean, I'm amenable. I know we have a lot of people perhaps that are here, but I'm amenable to giving him a month to actually talk to the people he said he was going to talk to.
I'd be willing to do that also.
I pushed hard to make that happen, to get set on this date. I realized it might have been a super tight squeeze with the holidays and everything. But I would like those conversations to happen. I feel like the developer does need to have conversations with the neighborhoods, homeowners. So I'm certainly agreeable to let those conversations take place. I certainly hope they will. And we can address that on February 2nd, assuming they have their permits and all their ducks in a row and things, which if he's hired legal counsel, that will probably be the case, So, is this an appropriate time to make a motion to defer that then?
If we do that, should we then bypass the public hearing aspects of this as well? Or-
I would, because you want the applicant to have an opportunity, not only to meet with them and try to mitigate any of their concerns, but also to make the presentation. The only request that I would have is that you specify, it sounds like you were going to, the exact date. That way you don't.
Date certain, yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
Yes, thank you.
So without further discussion or any objection, I would certainly move to defer this to the February 2nd Planning Commission agenda.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we defer the specific use permit SUP 20-08 until the February 2nd Planning Commission meeting. We will now vote.
Mr. Rickelman?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Allred?
Yes.
The motion passes 3 yes to no no's. The next item on the agenda is plans, policies, and ordinances for public hearing, discussion, and possible action. Text amendment text 20-05 to Chapter 23 Land Development Code, Article 18, Flood Hazard Regulation, Section 23-374, Provisions for Flood Hazard Reduction within the Land Development Code, Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Zach Henson. I'm the floodplain administrator for the city of Stillwater. And as you mentioned, we are bringing a text amendment to Chapter 23, Section 23-374. This comes after a review and recommendation by our regional CRS, our regional CRS person. This is going to be in 3 different locations: Section 23-374, subsection A4, subsection B1, and subsection B4. And it's going to be the addition of a required freeboard language for any mechanical equipment for structures that exist within the floodplain. So staff have been in discussion with the community rating system specialist in preparation for our upcoming CRS visit. We're going to have our CRS specialist come to our city. They're going to review our entire program in 2021. The city of Stillwater is currently a Class 7 community, which means that residents that live within FEMA regulatory floodplains receive a 15% discount on their premiums. Residents that live outside of that FEMA regulatory floodplain that have flood insurance policies, they receive a 5% discount on those policies. So this year, the CRS program has added a new Class 8 freeboard prerequisite. And in order for us to have the chance to maintain our Class 7 rank, we have to meet all of the lower class prerequisites. So this proposed text amendment allows the city to meet those Class 8 freeboard prerequisites and gives us the opportunity to maintain that Class 7 ranking. If we do not meet that Class 7 ranking and we do not meet the Class 8 freeboard prerequisites, the city could be degraded to a Class 9 community, and the discount would drop from 15% to 5% for those that live within the regulatory floodplain. So that would be a pretty immediate 10% increase in flood insurance policy premiums for residents that have current policies. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Please.
So, Mr. Henson, questions for you, please. So, based on your last sentence, this must mean that the further up you go, Class 8, Class 9, Class 10, you don't want to be in that ranking. You want to be 6, 7, 6, 5, 4.
It's a system that runs from Class 1 all the way to Class 10, 10 being the lowest. With each class that you move up, for the most part, you get an additional 5% discount for all policyholders.
Do you have, just out of curiosity, do you have any idea what rank we've had? Have we ever been on 9 or a 10?
To my knowledge, so 1 being best, obviously 10 being the lowest. To my knowledge, we have not been higher than a 7 since I've been here, have we? Okay. So 7 is the highest that we've been.
Mr. It's another question. Do you know anything about the CRS? Who is that? Is that a body? Is that a company? What is that?
Yes. So the CRS program, it's a voluntary program that the city participates in. There is a board that kind of follows the National Flood Insurance Policy program. So that one is mandatory. We have to participate in that NFIP in order for our residents to even have the ability to purchase floodplain insurance policies. The CRS is a program that goes above and beyond that. So for every base standard that we exceed that is required by the NFIP, we get points awarded to us. And obviously, the more points you get, the higher your ranking, the bigger discount you get. So.
The lower the ranking or higher? I'm getting confused on the scale.
I'm sorry. So 1 is best,
Right.
and 10 is the lowest. So the more points you are able to accumulate, the higher you move up on their scale, the lower your class number would be. So if we move up on the scale, we would be a Class 6. So,
Which is better than
Okay.
sorry for that confusing language.
I have no questions. And the changes seem really very modest, that they're just
Right.
clarifying maybe the lowest floor is clarified as just the bottom of the structure kind of stuff.
We
It's
have
all
had,
very straightforward.
we've had a 1-foot freeboard requirement in our ordinances for the finished floor elevation on structures. This will apply to any mechanical equipment that goes along with the structure, any HVAC, electrical equipment. Current language states that it must be sufficiently raised to prevent inundation during floods. This prerequisite requires us to have a specific 1-foot freeboard. So it's something that we already do enforce. It is just tweaking that language to make sure we meet their requirements.
What is the current date of our floodplain maps?
2007.
2007. Okay.
Perhaps you said this, I don't think I heard. This is an annual review, or this is just, we're just up for review and this happens randomly?
We have to recertify through the CRS program on an annual basis, and we send information into them, they review it, send their response back, and then every 5 years, a representative physically comes and they go through absolutely everything. So in 2021, we are up for that 5-year cycle visit. So.
I have no further questions.
Are there any additional questions for the thing?
No, I don't have
There's
any.
not really a public hearing per se, there's nobody here, so I can, so what's the pleasure of the planning commissioners?
Go ahead.
That's fine.
Without any further discussion or objections, I move to approve.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the recommendation and recommend for approval and sending it on to the city council.
Mr. Reckelman?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Allred?
Yes.
Very good. The motion passes 3 yes to no no's. The next item is miscellaneous items from staff, commissioners, or city attorney for discussion. Seeing nothing there, the next planning commission meeting is January 19th, 2021. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. What do you
Mr.
know?
Reckelman?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Allred?
Yes.
The motion to adjourn passes 3-0. Thank you all.